Whitechapel in East London. For crime fans, it's known for the at least five murders, committed by Jack the Ripper all those years ago. In this story, I look at a man who also killed on the same Whitechapel streets as Jack the Ripper as recently as 2007, but his name is largely unknown. I'm Adam Lloyd, and today I ask just how many people did Derek Brown kill? Our story starts today in Whitechapel Market. It's just a stone's throw from the infamous Blind Beggar pub, where on the 9th of March 1966, Ronnie Cray shot and murdered George Cornell, an associate of the rival gang the Richardsons, as he was sitting at the bar. You can buy most things at the outdoor Whitechapel Market, and back in 2007, DVDs were still a thing, as some of us may well remember. 29-year-old Zhao Mei Go made her living selling DVDs at Whitechapel Market. It was unlikely to ever make her millions, but Zhao, a mum of two boys, and her husband, they made enough money to keep them alive and to send money back to their families in southern China, including their two children who they left, taking that terribly difficult decision to leave as they stayed behind with relatives. It was hard for them to get a more Main Street job, as both had entered the UK illegally. The DVDs they sold were counterfeit, and it was just a matter of time before they were caught and up in front of the beak. And in 2007, Zhao's husband was sent to prison for this crime. When he was released, there was no sign of his wife. He checked with family, and she hadn't returned to China, and she hadn't been sent to prison. So, where exactly was she? At Whitechapel Market, he was told that she'd not been seen since August 2007. Terrified that something terrible had happened to his wife, he went to the police to report her as missing. Not long afterwards, on the 18th of September 2007, there was another disappearance. This time, 24-year-old Bonnie Barrett. The mum of a 6-year-old son, Bonnie was addicted to crack cocaine and had had a really tough time. She'd been selling sex on the streets of Whitechapel for a number of years before her disappearance. It was a desperate and dangerous way to scratch a living to fund this drug habit. Already by this stage, due to the chaotic nature of her life as an addict, Bonnie's son was living with her mum. Detectives felt that the two cases had to be connected, and they desperately scoured CCTV footage from the area for any sign of what had happened to the two women. There was positive footage of Zhao with a middle-aged man about the time she disappeared, and conversations with other sex workers around the Commercial Street area of Whitechapel revealed that Bonnie had been seen at about the same time, just before she disappeared, with the same man. He was someone known to the workers as a man who regularly bought sex from the streets in Whitechapel. Detectives now just had to find out who this man was. Of course, much easier said than done. They believed he was local and somebody in the area must recognize him. And so they flooded the local media and shops with wanted pictures displaying his face. And their break came in the most incredible and old fashioned way in October 2007, when police officers with a wanted picture were in a Londis general store in Rotherhithe, just across the Thames from Whitechapel. When they asked the assistant in the shop if he had seen the man in the picture before, he replied that he had. Then he pointed to a man in the shop browsing the shelves, saying, "And there he is, he's over there." And the man he was pointing at was indeed the man that he'd been looking for. He was 47-year-old Derek Brown. As the police had launched a massive hunt for the two women in separate inquiries, Brown had continued his life as normal, delivering newspapers and magazines to retailers overnight. He told police he'd known both of the missing women, having bought DVDs from Zhao in the past, and he said he had taken both Zhao and Bonnie back to his flat for paid sex that summer, but he emphatically denied being responsible for their disappearances. Detectives immediately went to search his one-bedroom flat in Rotherhithe. It seemed spotless at first, but ultraviolet lights revealed that Brown had attempted to wash bloodstains that were smeared across the walls of his bedroom and kitchen. Traces of the blood from both of the missing women were found splattered throughout his flat, even though he had tried to steam clean every surface. There were 65 blood spots identified in all. Neighbours had heard women's screams coming from the flat around this time, and he had ripped up his carpets and dumped them in communal bins. It looked like the police had got their man, and it looked like the two women had both died a utterly dreadful and terrifying death. There was no sign of the bodies of the two women, but police discovered it in the days after the suspected killings. Brown had made 3 trips to B&Q on the Old Kent Road, where he spent a total of £155 on cleaning products, a bow saw, a waterproof sheet, and roll after roll of industrial strength cling film. Detectives believed that Brown used the saw to chop up Bonnie and Zhao's bodies and dump them in the River Thames. He then used the cleaning products to attempt to clean away the evidence, but despite over 800 hours searching the river by police and divers, experts in their field, no trace of the women's remains was found. Brown said he'd been planning to leave his flat in Rotherhithe and move to Kent, and so that is why he'd been redecorating and why all the cleaning had taken place and the carpets had been changed. Looking more into his background, detectives uncovered that he was an avid reader about killers and mass murder, and his library card showed that one of his favourite writers was Jack the Ripper author Nigel Cawthorne. 3 weeks before detectives suspected he committed his first murder, he'd borrowed a library copy of Cawthorne's Killers, the most barbaric murders of our time. He also told a close friend, "You will hear of me," and boasted that he wanted to become famous in an unpleasant way. What a sad and scary man, huh? So, what was his background? Brown was originally from Preston in the northwest of England and a father of 3 children, although he showed no interest in and saw very little of his children. Those that knew him, you can probably guess from your knowledge of crime what sort of a man he was, but those who knew him said he was something of a loner, a heavy drinker, and he regularly sought the company of sex workers. He was known to have a large sexual appetite, it was said, and he lusted after slim, small breasted women, according to the sex workers he bought sex from regularly. He did have a track record. He was known to police colleagues in the Preston area for a series of previous convictions for burglary between 1976 and 1986. And in July 1989 at Preston Crown Court, he was jailed for 7 years after pleading guilty to rape. It was late 2007 when the police knocked on the door of Bonnie's mum, Jackie, in Woolworth, South London. Jackie said, "When they introduced themselves as homicide, I knew what that meant. They'd found Bonnie's DNA and traces of blood in Brown's flat. They told me that she was a sex worker and I was shocked. I knew she'd been struggling with drugs, but I didn't know she was on the game. It was devastating." Brown was charged with 2 counts of murder, to which he pleaded not guilty at his trial. The prosecution in the Old Bailey trial told how Brown had targeted the two women, as both lived on the edge of society and both were soft targets for the killer, who thought that neither woman would be missed. Brown said that he'd met Zhao 3 times before she disappeared. He said the last time he saw her, there were 2 Chinese men with her who were asking where her husband was. He said he saw one of them hit her with a metal rod and left her with a bloody nose, and that same man approached him and made it very clear that he shouldn't get involved or he too would come to harm. They looked like the type of people who get up to no good, he said. The prosecution said that the very last time Zhao was seen selling DVDs in Whitechapel Market was followed straight after by CCTV pictures showing her with Brown by Whitechapel Tube Station, and she was never seen again. In court, Brown also confirmed that he paid Bonnie Barrett to come back to his flat for sex, but he said he hadn't killed her. Brown was just a coward, one of those really unpleasant characters, not just for his deeds, but the fact he can't answer for what he's done. Although he was cross-examined by the prosecutor on the Monday, he refused to give any more evidence as the trial resumed on the Tuesday. When the judge asked Brown, "You know that if you refuse to answer further questions, the jury may draw such conclusions as they feel appropriate. You understand that fully?" He replied, "Yes." "You still refuse to return to the witness box?" asked the judge. Again, he replied, "Yes." The jury didn't need long to deliberate on their verdict, and within 3 hours, they were back to say they'd found Brown guilty on both counts of murder. They didn't believe his ridiculous story. It was Brown's 48th birthday as he was handed two 30-year sentences to run concurrently. On being found guilty, there was yet more lack of respect from Brown, who reacted by giving an exaggerated yawn. The judge told him, "You are a very, very dangerous man. You've been convicted on overwhelming evidence of the murders of two women within 3 weeks of each other. You have shown not a flicker of remorse. You took a devious and cowardly course at this trial, taking virtually a whole day to give your lying account to the jury, then refusing to be cross examined. You murdered two vulnerable women plying their trade on the streets precisely because of their availability and their lack of protection. While there is no direct evidence of how you disposed of the bodies, there is clear circumstantial evidence that you dismembered and then disposed of them using equipment and materials you bought purely for the purpose." Zhao's husband spoke after the trial to say, "The body still has not been found. It's really very difficult for me to accept the truth. It seems there'll be no closure. My sons don't know about this. I've tried to tell them, but I really don't have the courage to tell them the truth." He added that his wife was a very beautiful, traditional, and thoughtful person, and what she really wanted was her family to have a happy and bright future. Following the verdict, Detective Chief Inspector Mark Handier said, "Brown's motives remain unclear. He is a convicted rapist, which may indicate his intentions. But for a man of his age to kill two women in a few weeks may indicate that he sought notoriety. It is my view that he would have killed again if not stopped. He has shown no hint of remorse, and he deserves a lengthy sentence." 10 years after the trial, talking to Southwark Times newspaper, Bonnie's mum Jackie said, "It's a cold case and the police will reopen it every 2 years. And every 2 years they would go to the prison and see if he would talk about what he did anymore with the bodies. But the police have told me every time he just tells them to, he tells them to go away." She explains what happens when the anniversary of Bonnie's death arrives each year, saying how she has to shut herself away and not talk to anybody. "I sobbed and sobbed at the time," she said, "but I can talk about it now, and everyone tells me I'm so strong. But when her anniversary comes, I have to be left alone. No one even calls me because they know that I don't want to talk to anyone." She also explained how hard the murder trial was for her other daughter, Kelly, who was pregnant at the time. Kelly went into labour on the day that Brown was sentenced, and the following day she gave birth to the first of her three children. It was a little girl, and she called her Bonnie. So were there more victims of Brown? Well, he was sent to prison for 7 years for rape in '89. So if he was out in the early '90s, there were no more convictions until these two murders in 2007. Very unusual to have such a gap for a man of his age. There's lots of talk of police forces looking at him for unsolved murders, but so far he's not been charged with any. So had he not killed before? I find it hard to believe, don't you? Is the reality that his choice of victim means that he has killed more, but due to the chaotic lifestyles of his victims, he just wasn't caught for those offences? I wonder. What I find particularly shocking is that all those years after Jack the Ripper, Brown too preyed on vulnerable victims on the same Whitechapel streets and maybe others too. Until next time, cheerio for now.